You felt it, haven't you? That subtle shift in the air when someone truly powerful walks into a room. Not loud, not arrogant, but possessing an undeniable gravity. For years I observed this, craved it, yet felt perpetually on the outside looking in. I was the chameleon, bending to every expectation, my own colors fading into the background. Then I undertook an experiment, a deliberate 7-day cultivation of what I can only describe as dangerous power. And the transformation wasn't just internal. The way people saw me, interacted with me, responded to me, changed so profoundly it was like stepping into a new reality. This isn't about manipulation or intimidation. This is about unearthing the unshakable core within you, a power so authentic it fundamentally alters your presence in the world. And in this video, I'm laying bare exactly how 7 days of cultivating this dangerous power made people see me differently, and how you can begin your own journey. What is this dangerous power? It's dangerous to your old weaknesses. It's dangerous to the limiting beliefs that have held you captive. It's dangerous to the expectations others have unfairly placed upon you. It's the quiet roar of self-sovereignty. It's the unyielding spine of self-respect. It's the calm gaze that says, I know my worth and I will not be diminished. Over 7 distinct, focused days, I targeted the pillars of this internal fortress. Let's break down that week, day by day, and the seismic shifts that followed. Day 1. The incineration of illusions, radical self-confrontation. The first step towards this dangerous power wasn't about adding something new, but about burning away the old. Day 1 was dedicated to radical, brutal self-confrontation. For years, I told myself stories. I was nice, easygoing, a team player. The truth? I was often a doormat, terrified of disapproval and pathologically avoidant of conflict. This niceness was a shield, a flimsy defense mechanism born of insecurity, not genuine altruism. The exercise was simple, yet excruciating. I took a notebook and for hours listed every instance I could recall where I compromised my values for acceptance, where I said yes when I screamed no internally, where I swallowed my opinion to keep a fragile peace, where I allowed disrespect to slide. I didn't just list them. I relived the feeling, the sickening knot in my stomach, the bitter taste of resentment, the quiet shame of self-betrayal. One specific memory burned, a project meeting where a colleague blatantly took credit for my idea. I sat there, heart hammering, a protest dying on my lips. I smiled weakly, a pathetic attempt to appear unfazed. The dangerous power perspective forced me to ask, what did that silence truly cost me? Not just the credit, but a piece of my self-respect. The power I projected was one of harmlessness, of someone whose contributions could be easily appropriated. This wasn't about self-flagellation. It was about diagnosis. You cannot cure a disease you refuse to acknowledge. That day, I acknowledged the pervasive sickness of people-pleasing, of fear-based compliance that had defined my interactions. I saw how this safe approach had rendered me invisible, or worse, contemptible in the eyes of those who instinctively recognize and respect genuine strength. The shift in perception begins here internally. By finally looking my own weakness in the eye without flinching, without making excuses, a new kind of resolve began to form. It was the resolve to never again betray myself in that way. The immediate external change wasn't dramatic. How could it be after just one day? But something had changed. My internal landscape. The foundation was being cleared of debris. The dangerous power here was the courage to face the ugly truth of my own complicity in my powerlessness. People wouldn't see me differently until I saw myself differently, raw and unfiltered. This first day was the funeral pyre for the version of me that craved external validation more than self-respect. It was painful, yes, but immensely liberating. The air already felt clearer. Day 2, forging the unyielding will, the deliberate embrace of discomfort. If day 1 was about recognizing the rot, day 2 was about actively forging the steel to replace it. The dangerous power I sought wasn't a passive state. It was an active force, and active forces are built through resistance. So, day 2 was dedicated to the deliberate embrace of discomfort, specifically the discomfort I'd spent a lifetime avoiding. My modus operandi had always been to seek the path of least resistance. Difficult conversations, postponed indefinitely. Voicing a dissenting opinion in a group, unthinkable. Setting a boundary that might disappoint someone, agony. This comfort-seeking had kept me weak, predictable, and easily managed by others. The task for day 2 was to identify 3 specific actions that day which would normally fill me with dread, and to execute them. Not recklessly, but deliberately. First, there was a lingering issue with a service provider who had overcharged me. Normally, I'd sigh, maybe write a half-hearted email and then let it go, telling myself it wasn't worth the hassle. This time I called. My voice trembled slightly at first, but I stated my case clearly, calmly, and firmly, referencing the agreed-upon terms. There was pushback, excuses. The old me would have caved. The day 2 me held the line, respectfully but unyieldingly. The refund was processed. A small victory, but it felt monumental. Second, at work, during a team brainstorming session, a dominant colleague was pushing an idea I knew had critical flaws. The usual knot formed in my stomach, but I remembered day 2's mandate. I waited for a pause, then spoke. Mark, I understand your perspective on X, but have we considered the potential bottleneck with Y if we proceed that way? I didn't attack. I questioned. I offered a counter-perspective grounded in logic. There was a moment of surprised silence. Mark, usually dismissive of quieter voices, actually paused and said, "That's a fair point. Let's explore that." People looked at me, a flicker of new awareness in their eyes. I hadn't been aggressive. I had been assertive. Third, a friend had been consistently late for our meetups, sometimes by half an hour or more, with flimsy apologies. It always bothered me, but I'd never said anything beyond a mild, "Oh, you made it." That evening before our planned meeting, I sent a text. "Hey, really looking forward to tonight. Just a heads up, I've got a hard stop at 9 p.m., so if you're running significantly late, we might need to reschedule." It was polite, but the boundary was clear. He arrived 5 minutes early. Each instance was a microdose of dangerous power. The danger was to my old patterns. The power came from proving to myself that I could withstand the discomfort of potential conflict or disapproval and emerge, not only intact but stronger. People began to see me differently because my actions were different. I was no longer a guaranteed pushover. I was someone who valued my time, my resources, and my own judgment. This subtle shift in my behavior signaled a shift in my self-perception, and that transmission was being received. The discomfort didn't magically disappear, but my relationship with it changed. It became a compass, pointing towards growth. Day 3. The articulation of sovereignty, unapologetic boundary setting. Day 2 was about confronting discomfort. Day 3 was about codifying that newfound strength into clear, communicated limits. This was the day of unapologetic boundary setting. Dangerous power isn't just an internal feeling. It's an external reality shaped by what you will and will not tolerate. For too long, my boundaries had been porous, easily breached, often unstated out of fear of offending or appearing difficult. The task for day 3 was to identify areas where my boundaries were consistently violated or simply non-existent, and to proactively and unapologetically assert them. This wasn't about building walls to keep people out, but about defining the perimeter of my own sovereignty. One major area was my time and energy outside of work. Certain colleagues had a habit of calling or messaging at all hours with non-urgent queries, expecting immediate responses. I had always obliged, fearing I'd seem uncooperative. On day 3, I made a conscious decision. Unless it was a genuine emergency, I would not respond to work communications after 7 p.m. That evening, a non-urgent query came in at 8:30 p.m. I saw it. I felt the familiar itch to reply immediately. Instead, I put my phone down. The next morning, I replied promptly and professionally. No apology for the delay, no explanation, just a response during work hours. The sky didn't fall. The colleague didn't explode. They got their answer when it was appropriate. Another instance involved a family member who often made subtle but persistent demands on my weekends, usually framed as favors that were inconvenient and draining. When the inevitable Saturday morning call came with a new request, instead of my usual sigh and reluctant agreement, I said, "I understand you need help with that, but I have prior commitments this weekend and won't be able to. Perhaps you could try X or Y." There was a surprised pause on the other end. A little guilt-tripping ensued. The old me would have crumbled. The day 3 me, channeling this dangerous power, held firm, politely but without wavering or over-explaining. "I hope you managed to get it sorted," I said, and ended the conversation. The power in this wasn't about being unkind. It was about being clear. It was about teaching others, through direct action, how I expected to be treated. Apologizing for having boundaries is like apologizing for existing. It signals that your needs are secondary, your time infinitely flexible, your energy a communal resource. People see you differently when your no means no, and your yes is a genuine commitment, not a reluctant concession. They begin to understand that your resources, time, energy, attention are valuable because you treat them as valuable. The danger in these boundaries is to those who are accustomed to exploiting your lack of them. For others, it fosters respect. They might not always like your boundaries, but they learn to operate within them. This clarity, this unwillingness to be endlessly imposed upon, is a core component of how dangerous power is perceived. It's the quiet confidence of knowing where you end and others begin, and calmly enforcing that line. Day 4. The citadel of silence, cultivating inner authority and observation. After the active engagements of Day 2 and Day 3, Day 4 was about shifting inwards, towards the cultivation of inner authority through stillness and observation. Dangerous power isn't always loud. Often, its most potent form is found in silence, in the ability to observe without immediate reaction, to listen without the desperate need to speak, to be comfortable in a pause. My old pattern was to fill silences, to nervously chatter, to seek validation by constantly contributing, often saying more than necessary. I equated silence with awkwardness, or worse, with my own inadequacy. Day 4 was designed to dismantle this. The instruction, speak less, listen more, observe everything. In meetings, I made a conscious effort to let others speak first, to truly hear them out without formulating my rebuttal mid-sentence. Instead of jumping in with an immediate opinion, I'd take a breath, consider, and if I did speak, ensure my words were concise and impactful. I noticed something remarkable. When I spoke less, my words seemed to carry more weight. People leaned in. The scarcity made the contribution more valuable. I practiced this in social settings too. Instead of dominating conversations or feeling the pressure to entertain, I allowed myself to simply be present, to observe the dynamics, to listen to the subtext. It was surprisingly revealing. You learn a lot about people when you're not focused on your own performance. A key moment came during a casual lunch with colleagues. A slightly controversial topic arose and opinions were flying. The old me would have felt compelled to jump in, to pick a side, to make my voice heard. This time I listened. I watched faces, body language. When there was a lull and someone turned to me expectantly, "What do you think?" I didn't offer a knee-jerk opinion. I paused, then said something like, "It's a complex issue with valid points on multiple sides. I'm still processing the different perspectives." This wasn't a cop-out, it was genuine, and it was received differently than a half-baked, immediate take. It projected thoughtfulness, not indecision. The dangerous power here is the power of self-containment. It's the authority that comes from not needing to constantly prove yourself, not needing to fill every void with your own noise. It's the quiet confidence that your presence, your thoughts, have inherent value without needing to be constantly advertised. People are often unsettled, in a good way, by someone who is comfortable in their own skin, comfortable with silence. They project an aura of knowing more than they say, of having a deep well of thought beneath the surface. This stillness makes others lean in. It makes them curious. It makes them, dare I say, slightly intimidated by the unknown depths. They start to see you not as an open book to be easily read and dismissed, but as someone with a rich inner world, a quiet authority that doesn't need to shout to be felt. Day 5. The embodiment of inherent worth, projecting value before a word is spoken. With the internal work of the previous days laying a new foundation, Day 5 focused on the external projection of this burgeoning power, the embodiment of inherent worth. Dangerous power isn't just about what you do or say. It's about the energy you radiate, the unspoken message your very presence conveys before you even open your mouth. This day was about acting as if you are already the person of immense value, because, fundamentally, you are. For years, my posture, my eye contact, my general demeanor often screamed apology. A slight slump, eyes darting away, a nervous energy that signaled a lack of conviction in my own right to occupy space. Day 5 was a conscious recalibration of this physical and energetic signature. The core practice. Before entering any room, any interaction, I would take a moment. I'd stand tall, shoulders back, breathe deeply, and consciously inhabit my body with a sense of purpose and self-respect. I would make deliberate eye contact, not aggressive but steady and engaged. I focused on moving with intention, not rushing or fidgeting. Walking into the office that morning felt different. I didn't scurry to my desk. I walked with a measured pace, acknowledging colleagues with a calm nod and direct gaze. It sounds trivial, but the subtle shifts in nonverbal communication are incredibly potent. People register these cues subconsciously. A more significant test came later. I had to give a brief, informal update to a senior manager, someone whose presence usually made me feel flustered. Normally, I'd approach his office almost deferentially. This time, I took that preparatory moment. I knocked, entered with an upright posture, met his gaze directly, and held it for a natural moment before speaking. I delivered my update clearly, concisely, without excessive apology or qualification. His response was markedly different from previous interactions. He listened more intently, asked more considered questions. There was a level of engagement, of peer-to-peer respect that hadn't been there before. He was reacting to the energy I projected, one of competence, calm, and self-assurance. The dangerous power here lies in the understanding that perception is often shaped by these pre-verbal cues. If you project nervousness and lack of self-worth, people will, consciously or unconsciously, treat you accordingly. If you project quiet confidence and inherent value, they are far more likely to respond with respect and attentiveness. It's not about arrogance. It's about congruence. Your external demeanor begins to match the internal strength you're cultivating. People started to look at me differently. Not just glance, but see me. There was a new stillness about me that seemed to command a different kind of attention. It was as if an invisible shield of self-respect had become visible, repelling casual disrespect and inviting genuine engagement. This embodiment wasn't an act. It was the outward manifestation of the internal shifts from the preceding days. It was becoming, not performing. And that authenticity is magnetic. Day 6. The unflinching gaze achieving emotional sovereignty. Day 6 was perhaps the most internally demanding, yet profoundly liberating. The achievement of emotional sovereignty. This is the capacity to remain centered and unswayed by external attempts to provoke, manipulate, or emotionally destabilize you. Dangerous power is critically undermined if your internal state is a puppet dancing to the tune of others' moods, provocations, or approval. My default had often been to be overly empathetic to the point of absorbing others' negativity, or to be easily thrown off balance by criticism, perceived slights, or pressure tactics. Day 6 was about consciously disengaging from these emotional hooks. The goal wasn't to become unfeeling, but to become the calm eye of the storm. The practice involved heightened awareness of my emotional reactions throughout the day. When I felt a surge of defensiveness, anxiety, or the urge to placate someone expressing displeasure, I was to pause, breathe, and consciously choose my response rather than reacting on autopilot. A key test arrived in the form of an unexpected, somewhat unfair criticism from a team member during a stressful project phase. The old me would have either become visibly flustered and apologetic, or internally seethed with resentment that would leak out later. This time, I listened fully to the criticism without interrupting. I took a deliberate breath. Instead of defending or attacking, I responded calmly. I understand your frustration with the issue. Let me review the specific point of contention and see how we can address it effectively. My tone was even, my demeanor composed. There was no emotional charge. The effect was palpable. The team member, perhaps expecting a defensive outburst or a capitulation, seemed to deflate slightly. The tension in the room lessened. By not meeting their emotional intensity with my own, I had de-escalated the situation and retained my composure, my authority. Later that day, I encountered a more subtle form of manipulation. Someone trying to subtly guilt me into taking on an extra task they didn't want to do, using phrases like, "You're so much better at this stuff and I'm swamped." The old me, eager for approval and conflict avoidant, would have sighed and agreed. The day 6 me, practicing emotional sovereignty, smiled calmly and said, "I appreciate the vote of confidence, but my plate is full with my current priorities. I'm sure you'll manage it well." No anger, no resentment, just a clear, emotionally neutral boundary. The dangerous power here is immense. When people realize they cannot easily ruffle your feathers, manipulate your emotions, or bait you into unproductive conflict, their tactics change. They begin to approach you with more respect, more directness. Your emotional stability becomes a source of strength, not just for you, but it can also have a calming effect on those around you. You're no longer seen as someone whose buttons can be easily pushed. You are perceived as grounded, centered, and in control of your own internal state, a deeply powerful position. This isn't about being cold or aloof. It's about choosing not to participate in emotional games, and that choice commands a unique form of respect. It signals that your peace is not up for negotiation. Day 7. The unveiling, witnessing the transformation in others' eyes. Day 7 was less about active doing and more about being and observing. It was the unveiling, the day to consciously witness the accumulated impact of the previous 6 days, to see how this cultivated dangerous power was now tangibly, undeniably making people see me differently. This wasn't about seeking validation, but about gathering evidence of the profound shift that occurs when your internal world fundamentally changes and aligns with your external actions. Throughout the week, I had noticed small changes, flickers of new responses. But on day 7, with the layers of self-honesty, discomfort embracing, boundary setting, inner authority, embodied value, and emotional sovereignty all coalescing, the differences were no longer subtle. They were overt. In the morning meeting, when I spoke, there wasn't just silence, there was active listening. Heads nodded. People who used to interrupt waited for me to finish. My opinions, once perhaps considered but easily dismissed, were now solicited. "What's your take on this?" The deference wasn't fear-based. It felt like genuine respect for a perspective they had come to value. Interactions that used to be fraught with my own anxiety felt smoother, more direct. I noticed a colleague who had a history of being somewhat condescending towards me now approaching me with a question, their tone markedly more respectful, almost seeking guidance. It wasn't that I had suddenly become an expert in everything, but my presence communicated a gravitas that invited a different kind of interaction. Even casual encounters felt different. The barista at the coffee shop, who usually gave a cursory nod, made eye contact and smiled more genuinely. Strangers seemed to give me a little more space, not in an avoidant way, but in a way that acknowledged presence. It's hard to quantify these micro-interactions, but they accumulate into a palpable sense of being perceived with greater regard. One of the most striking observations was the reduction in attempts to impose, to push, to test my limits. It was as if an invisible memo had gone out. This individual operates from a place of solid self-respect. Approach accordingly. The dangerous power wasn't about me becoming a threat to others, but a threat to their old ways of interacting with me if those ways were based on my previous perceived weakness. The most profound realization of Day 7 was this: the way people see you is a direct reflection of the way you see yourself, and the way you consistently show up in the world. This dangerous power wasn't a mask I put on. It was the result of stripping away illusions and insecurities, and allowing an authentic, self-respecting core to emerge. People weren't reacting to a new technique. They were reacting to a more congruent, more powerful version of me. They saw me differently because I was different. The power was real because it was rooted in genuine internal change. This wasn't just about a good week. It was the blueprint for a new way of being. This 7-day journey was an initiation. The dangerous power I began to cultivate wasn't a finite resource acquired and then depleted. It was the awakening of an intrinsic human capacity for self-possession and authentic influence. The way people saw me changed because the lens through which I viewed myself had been ground clean, revealing a clarity and strength that had always been there, just buried under layers of self-doubt and societal conditioning. This isn't about becoming someone you're not. It's about becoming more of who you truly are, stripped of the fear and the need for external approval that dilutes your essence. The dangerous power is the courage to be honest with yourself, to embrace what challenges you, to define your own terms, to trust your inner voice, to embody your inherent worth, and to remain sovereign over your emotional landscape. The shift in perception from others is merely a byproduct, a reflection of the profound internal transformation. They see you differently because you are radiating a different energy, an energy of quiet confidence, unshakable self-respect, and an unapologetic commitment to your own truth. This power is dangerous only to your limitations, to the status quo that keeps you small. Your 7 days might look different. Your challenges, your breakthroughs will be unique. But the principles remain. Begin today. Confront your illusion, step into discomfort, define your boundaries, cultivate your inner authority, embody your value, master your emotions, and then watch. Watch as the world begins to mirror the respect and AWE you finally, fully claimed for yourself. This isn't just about how others see you. It's about how you choose to live, how you choose to command your own existence. The power is within you. It's time to unleash it.